Okay, everybody, welcome to NOVA Scribes. It's nice to have you again. And tonight, very excited to have Emily Mills and her book, The Art of Visual Note-Taking. So everybody, yay, big hand for Emily.
Yay! Thanks for having me.
Nice to see you, Emily. So Emily, so you got into, we're just going to jump into it, if that's all right. First of all, let
Yeah.
me just say, I read a lot, and I had to forget just about everything I know about graphic recording and graphic facilitation when I read your book, because it was so
Uh-oh.
no. It was so good because it was like, oh wow, these are ways that make what I do just like so much better, you know? Like it was really I've read a lot and I've never seen a book that is as technically informative as yours is. It really goes like piece by piece by piece, teaching you every step of the way. It's extremely methodical, right? So tell me a little bit about it. What inspired it? Why'd you decide to write this?
Yeah, the short story is I didn't decide to write it. A publisher approached me and asked me to, and I was like, I mean, yeah, no one's gonna say no to that. So I was in the midst of taking my in-person sketchnoting workshop and putting it into an online course format when this happened. And so I kind of felt like I was already writing the book. I had done this in-person workshop a few times and I'd validated that students liked it. I kind of figured out the way that I wanted to teach it. And I was already typing it and putting it into an online course. So writing a book felt like an easy next step. Spoiler alert, it was not easy and it was a lot of work. But that's kind of what inspired it is just I started out sketchnoting and I made a rule to myself that I would post every single sketchnote on social media as like a personal test. It's like if I don't like it, I still have to post it because it'll motivate me to get better because of my shame or whatever you want to call it. So shame, motivation, embarrassment. And so I just posted tons and tons on social media and eventually I got better. But all that to say, people started following me and wanting to learn sketchnoting. And so that's kind of how this whole thing started in the first place was, wow, I like what you do. Can you teach me how to do it? Enter the in-person workshops, enter the online course slash book, and that's just kind of how the momentum grew.
I was about to say you're the only person who has said writing a book is easy. I'm glad you went back and revised that a little bit. Yeah, I mean, thank you for putting it into existence. Do you still live in Nashville? I noticed that at the very beginning.
I do not. I moved to Bend, Oregon in July.
Right, very cool. So I mean, let's just jump into it. And if you've got a copy of the book, I will try to remember to tell you which page I'm on. I'm trying to get better at that. One of the things that really jumped out at me, like at the very beginning, and I wondered if this was a maybe has changed post-COVID or not, but you said you're not as fast as a visual note taker on your iPad as you are on paper. Has that changed?
I think it has. So when this book came out, you can even tell by my drawing, like, of course, my background isn't working, but the Apple Pencil, you can tell it's the first gen because it's got the little cap on there. That's just one downside of
Oh, and
doing an
this is page
illustration in a book.
22, before I forget.
Um, I wasn't doing a lot of digital at the time because the iPad was new. There weren't a ton of drawing apps out there, and I am very change averse. I hate change. I'm not very fast to change. And so I resisted digital sketchnoting for a really long time. It was more like I'm going to try this on the side. The pandemic definitely accelerated that. And now I work almost 100% digitally, but I do still keep a sketch notebook and I also keep little tiny sketchbooks that I do sketch notes in, but it's on a much smaller scale and way less formal.
And by the way, if anybody else has a question, feel free to jump in. You can go off mute. You can drop it into chat if you've got a question for Emily about what we're talking about. And again, we're on page 22 here. So 23, I noticed that you said slippery is one of the cons of the iPad. So you've gone, oh, I just heard you say you've gone completely digital. Have you found a solution for slippery?
Yeah, they make I think it's called the Paper-like. It's like a film that you put on top of your iPad. I still do not use that. Again, it's just something you get over with practice, I think, but some people do like using that Paper-like film, whatever you want to call it. Um, so I think that's a very good solution to the slippery problem. And then also just making sure that your nibs are up to date and not just flattened and ruined is another good way. I think they also make nibs that have different like resistances on them. So you can try different nibs as well.
I haven't tried the different nibs. If anybody has, I'd love to hear what you've used. I think I've seen some rubber ones on Instagram or something like that. So if anybody's tried,
Again, I'm change averse. I'm like, why would I change that if I just got used to this iPad 2 years ago?
well, so speaking of which, and I did this with Mike before. So you've got like a whole section here on your favorite things to write with. And I noticed that you're a fan of the Pigma microns. Those are like my favorite as well, right? What do you like about them?
So they're not my favorite anymore.
Oh,
Again,
really? What do you think
downside of writing a book yet again. See if I can pick them out of here. My new ride or die is the Tombow Mono Twin.
now? Cool.
It's permanent ink. It's oil based, so you can go over with yellow and it won't bleed. It has a thicker nib and a thinner nib, and they're just awesome. The only downside is that they do bleed more than a traditional pen. But if you like microns, you might actually like these, which I found at Target. It's called U brands,
New
and
brands.
these are also a permanent pen. And it's pretty much like a micron. They only come in one size that I found so far, but I mean, you can buy them at Target and they're like in fun colors and they're really cute. So there's that too.
What was that first one again?
Tombow Mono Twin.
Mono Twin. And I'm on page 25 if you've got the book with you.
Side note, so I have a giant PDF. I want to say it's like 10 pages of
Okay.
my favorite tools. If you just go to Sketchnote Academy and scroll down,
Mhm.
or no, wait, let me just make sure I can get everyone to the direct link. Sketchnote Academy /guide. Yep, that's it. Here is the link where you can download that PDF without actually subscribing or signing up for my email list. So just go ahead and download the PDF if you want to know what my favorite pens are.
And by the way, I think that everybody should subscribe. Let me just say that. I mean, the nice thing about, let me say this is that, Emily, you don't put fluff in your blog. Like it's always like, here's something really, really useful, to know. It's not like, here's what I had for dinner last Friday. It's
Like
really,
a recipe website where you got to
yeah,
scroll.
exactly. All right, cool. Anything else you found? Like tool wise, drawing wise?
um, no, I think if anything, I realized the more that sketchnoting has become my job and less of a hobby,
Yeah.
the more important it is to make sure that I make time to do it for fun. And I realized I wasn't doing it for fun because my sketchbook was too big.
Hmm.
And I only had small increments of time to do sketch notes in between things or while I was waiting. And doing a half a sketch note on a full page just doesn't jive with me. And so that's why I've kind of switched to the small notebooks for sketchnoting for personal, because it makes it easier and more fun.
A lot of
And now I actually enjoy doing it instead of feeling daunted by it.
So does it still feel like work when you do it, or is it still fun?
I think it's still fun. It only feels like work, and if I feel like I have to fill up like a whole spread, which is why the small makes me psychologically more happy.
Yeah, cool. And Dana, thanks for dropping that link in. I appreciate it. All right, a couple other things I wanted to talk to you about. So this was you do a whole section on lettering, and I'm starting on page 34 here. Um, I love this idea right here. Just of practicing the well-rounded out letters. So tell me, why did you pick this one in particular to practice?
I believe this font is Century Gothic or like an offshoot of it, and I picked it because it's round. It's kind of like when you think about practicing your handwriting in like third or fourth grade, they give you those practice sheets with like the dashed lines where the different letters are supposed to be. And this font kind of reminded me of that, where it's like an A is a circle. And so you're kind of relating the letters to shapes and lines, just because I feel like it makes it easier. If you've got like the Times New Roman A, it's like a straight bit with a curve on top and then this weird oval thing, and there's like a tail, and it's like that's kind of hard to write. Let's start with the basics. It's a circle and a line. Boom, you're done. Letter A.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I apologize for my dog. He hates the Amazon delivery guy. He's got like some sort of vendetta against him. So this was a bold move, by the way, so I'm on page 35 now. Am I getting this right? Were these like your first ever visual notes that you took and you decided to like just publish them out there and put them out there in the world? I think I burned mine. I don't know. I think it was really bold that you did that. So, The other thing that I noticed, and I heard this from Mike last time, is that you guys both do a lot of drawing in church. Where I guess it's okay. If I'd done that, probably I would have gotten whacked on my knuckles with a, ruler by some nun or something like that. Anyway, so like, tell me about the just as you're comparing and contrasting, your first one with this one here. Um, what comes up for you as you take a look at this?
When I look at it, I just remember feeling like, oh, I know what I want it to look like, and then feeling very disappointed that it didn't look like that. So it's like I knew in my head what I really wanted. Like, okay, I know that there are elements like a header, and I know that I can draw pictures, and I know I can write, and that the writing can be more expressive, and it could be like lettering and illustrative lettering. But I didn't really know how to tie all those pieces together yet. So what I see in my first sketch note is a really good first attempt where I have all of the elements, but they're just not tied together very well, and they're
Yeah.
not executed very well. But like, I'm still proud of it. Like, I think it was a great first start, and I have so much room for improvement. Like, I can't even read the handwriting. So
Right. Well, so what I love about this is that it's like there's hope, right? Because when we teach this stuff, a lot of people they do something like this, they say, well, it doesn't look like that, so I might as well give up, right?
yeah.
And yet, you can go from what I love about this is you can say, okay, I started here and now I'm here, or probably in your case, it's the book has been out for what, about 3 years now?
Mhm.
That you're probably even way beyond this. I mean, just the learning curve on this when you get into it, it's just exponential. I mean, you can
Right.
really see growth very quickly when you do this work.
And it's not about being the best illustrator, the best aesthetic sketchnoter. Like, if someone's best attempt looks like my first sketch note, I think that's okay. Like, it doesn't have to be amazing. It just has to be visual, and you have to enjoy doing it. If you're not having fun, and if you're not incorporating visuals, then I don't think that's really sketchnoting.
Yeah, I agree. So I love this part because I love picking up like new lettering styles, especially if it's easy. By the way, I'm on page 37 on this one. So you've got three here. I'd never seen this one before. The trace over. Tell me about trace over.
It's basically, I think I learned that from, I don't remember who I learned that from, but I know I didn't come up with it. It was just a way to make your letters fatter more easily. It's like make a block letter by getting a fatter tool and going over it. So like, I worked at a company where we used Neuland markers.
Mhm.
And I think that's who it was. I learned it from the people who were teaching me how to do graphic recording. So it's basically like, hey, do what you know how to do, and then trace over it with this really fat Neuland marker, and boom, you have a block letter. And then you can always like trace the outside of it or just fill it in.
That's really cool. And then you've got also on here, you've got block letters, you've got double lines. Ari says in chat, it was not in Mike's book. Mike,
It
I don't
could be in
remember
Mike's
that one.
book.
Mike, was that in your book, the trace over thing?
I don't think so. I don't know. I'd have to look and see it. It doesn't ring a bell, at least that term.
Yeah. But Mike, since you're here, you have the most gorgeous double line I've ever seen. Emily talks about it. Yours is like, if I could get anything, it would be your double line. I think it's just like the best thing ever. Right.
Also, side note, Mike has a whole ass font called Sketchnote or Sketchnote 1, and you can purchase that to use digitally. If you feel like you don't like writing your sketch notes, just download the font and put it in your sketchnote, and it looks like,
Oh, I'm so doing this. That's great. Mike, can you drop the link into chat? I'll make sure it gets on
Sure. And
the
if
show
you
notes.
don't want to spend money, and you have the Adobe Suite, it is embedded in this Adobe Suite as well for free. Well,
Yay! I'll go check it
pay
out.
for it with the Adobe Suite, but that's not my problem. That's Adobe's.
So this was a really cool move. So you have this whole section, and again, if you haven't read the book, it's like one technique after another, after another, after another, after another. And you've got this whole section on embellishments, and this is just the start of it, where you're just talking about shadows. I really loved this move right here. I hadn't seen that before, or maybe I had, just hadn't seen it like documented that way. But to your point, some of the things is that you can go overboard with embellishments, and it's real easy to do too much and end up losing the form or having it be distracting. And I really, I started doing this after I read this because I just thought that this was a great way to tie a word together with the shadow. Have you got any more tricks up your sleeve when it comes to shadows, especially with lettering? Because I loved this one.
Um, the thing that comes to mind actually for this is I believe I did a workshop, or maybe it's a download on different methods of coloring. And it feels really elementary to me, but when you break down, hey, this is how you color your sketch notes. There's 5 different methods of coloring. This is kind of in there. It's like shadow shading is one method of coloring, and you can kind of expand on that further. So let me remember what that resource is, and I will drop a link to it.
Okay, cool. And by the way, this is on page 39 if you're following along.
Nancy got it. Confident Coloring Workshop, and she said it was great.
Thank you, Nancy. So great. And Mike, thanks for sharing that link, by the way. Okay. And then speaking of embellishments, I'm just going to skip cursive. I can't for the life of me. I just can't get cursive. When I
I'm
do
not
cursive,
a calligrapher.
yeah, it's like it just throws me back into like, second grade, and I just end up feeling awkward. But now this stuff was really, really cool. So adding like texturing effects to block letters. Is this something you do a lot of?
I actually don't, because I feel like the work that I do is usually so rushed that I don't get to have fun with my letters.
Mhm.
But when I do have a more passive project, like a sketch note that's done from a Word document instead of a voice recording or like a live event, then I do try and do some more text pizzazz.
Right. Yeah. One of the challenges that I run into, especially if I'm doing a title, is that it's never something it's never something as simple as like SXSW. It's never like South by Southwest, right? It's always like, the ABC Corporation's management senior executive offsite, quarterly strategic planning session retreat, right? It's like the title's like a million miles long, right? So it's like, how do you deal when you've got like a really, really long title? You
Yeah,
got
I
any tricks for
learned
like cool stuff that you can do with that?
I took a workshop through IFVP recently,
Mhm.
and I am blanking on the guy's name. I think he lives in Germany, but it was just about titles and how he does titles more creatively. And one of the things that I took away from that workshop is the title can be like plain text black, but the stuff around it can be really interesting. So I remember he showed some examples from like public works kind of stuff, like infrastructure and planning. And he drew like cityscapes and cars and streetlights. And it was just so cool to have that title be visually engaging, since the title wasn't.
Yeah, that's pretty neat. So like embellishing it with illustration then. That's a great
Yeah.
idea. Okay. Um, okay, so leveling up, and I'm on page 51 if you've got the book. So I just loved how you shared, because like most people can do this. This might seem a little intimidating if you're just getting started. So tell me a little bit about leveling up. How do you do that?
It's basically just following your confidence and starting with ground zero. And I have a mantra: recognizable over realistic. If people can recognize your drawing, then it's good enough and you can move on and feel good about it. But if you have time, then you can level it up and make it look a little bit more recognizable. So you can, this first house, you could say, oh, it's an arrow or it's a house. It's still pretty recognizable, but it could go either way. And so leveling up just kind of adds a little bit more context so that the recognition is a little bit faster. And then you can really go overboard and go full Illustrator if you have the time. But if you don't, I feel like leveling up to the point where it's undeniably recognizable is the goal.
Nice. Cool. Thank you. All right, I'm gonna skip ahead. This was again something that I'd never seen before, and I had to learn this. I had never seen a stick hand before. I'd seen stick people. I'd never seen a stick hand before. I'm like, that is so cool. So tell me a little bit about the stick hand.
It's just like the poor man's hand. Hands are really hard to draw. And I was trying to think of, I think I was doing it in sketch notes, like using like a ballpoint pen, really tiny. I was like,
Mhm.
I can't draw a hand in this little tiny microscopic space. So I kind of had to simplify it to a stick hand. And that's kind of how that came about. It isn't as versatile as other methods of drawing a hand, but I think it kind of works. A lot of times when I'm drawing stick people and they're doing something, it's literally just like a black dot for the hand, and then I have like 2 sticks for 2 fingers up or whatever it is.
Yeah, I love this idea because if you're facilitating, and if it's not so much about the aesthetic as it is about just getting the essence of the thing as quickly as possible. I mean, one of the my kryptonite is drawing a handshake. I'm really bad at drawing handshakes. It's like this weird shape where you've got, stuff on top of stuff. You can't really model your own hand. You can't really look at yourself shaking your own hand. And so this is just to make this thing super easy. I love this idea of the stick hand. I had not seen that one before. So here's something else I wanted to, this was really great when I saw it. So I'm on page 65, right? Hair is another one for me that's kind of tricky, right? Because it's like you draw the head and then bam, well, I forgot about the hair. So like going back over it to do the hair. I just love how you did this, and how you've got this consistent style about it. So I mean, can you tell me a little bit about like how you draw hair?
Yeah, I've been drawing cartoons since middle school. Like I was the cartoonist for the paper from middle school until I graduated college. And so whenever I drew a character, it was usually a guy because women's hair was way harder to do. If I drew a woman, she had hair long or in a ponytail. And if I drew a guy, he had like the scraggly, I don't even know how to describe it, just like spiky hair. And so that was my default for a really long time. But then I realized, oh, that's not super inclusive. Not everyone looks like that. So I had to start learning how to draw hair in different ages, races, body types, whatever, even facial hair. And so hair can be really hard. And I feel like the easiest way to learn it is to relate it to like the basic lines. You can have a straight line or a crooked line or a curly line or overlapping curly cues, and just see what you can make from it to represent the real hairstyle. I actually have a little section of this in my intermediate drawing course to like learn how to look at a picture of someone and identify the recognizable lines in their hairstyle and draw a simplified version of it.
Mm-hmm. Cool. Thanks for that. And Benoit, looks like it just dropped in a picture of a handshake. So thanks for that, Benoit. I appreciate it. I'll have to go back and study that now. So you mentioned your intermediate course. Are we going to get links to all of these, I hope?
Sure.
Cool. Thank you. How often do you do portraits? Like if you're doing, if you've got a speaker,
If I have time, I'll do it every time, but I don't always have time. So, case in point, I was recently at a gig in Miami. I flew in actually 2 days before, just because coming from Oregon, it's like a ways. So
Yeah.
it takes literally all day to get there. You can't just fly in the night before because you'll get there at 11 p.m. and then you won't be rested in order to do the next day. So I actually had a whole day to spare beforehand to prep all the boards. And I spent literally all day making these boards look awesome. I did the portraits way more realistically than I would if I could only do it in 5 minutes, because I had the time. Now there's times where I show up to an event and I'm like, okay, where's the boards? Great, we're starting in 5 minutes. And I either skip the portrait altogether or I do like a really fast version.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm drawing portraits, I have a fast version and then like a slow version.
Yeah. So you're drawing on foam core, I take it?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What do you have a preferred type, style, source? Because this is really geeking out, but
A foam core?
yeah.
I usually sometimes I just make the client get it, and whatever they get, I'm like, whatever, it's great. I
Good idea.
don't think I've distinguished between them well enough, but Elmer's has been pretty good.
Mhm.
I've gotten some bad ones from Office Depot or Max. I get those two mixed up, but it's like you get it and the paper's like really absorbent and it
Right.
dents really easily. So there are definitely better foam cores out there than others. I just don't know what they are yet.
That's why I asked, because I think I've gotten some of those like bad ones too. It's like, this isn't great to, draw on. You end up trying to like wrap it with paper or something, or making do when you're, in a new city.
Yeah, but then again, some clients just toss your stuff in the dumpster at the end of the event anyways. So it's like, well, does it really matter?
Yeah. Dana puts in chat, a colleague of mine pays someone to format with headline/drawings her paper templates. So when she enrolls them, she already looks like a rock star. That's a really good idea. I'll have to remember that one. Thanks, Dana. All right. So visual direction, this one was really cool because it's like, again, such a great resource for all of the different styles and types. So you have a library of containers here, right? Do you have ones? I mean, there's a lot in here. What's your favorite one? What's your go-to?
I usually do a road sign, so it's just
Mhm.
like a box with 2 feet and then some grass underneath. I don't even think it made it in the book,
I think
but
it's in here,
that's
yeah.
my go-to is like a road sign.
And what do you do if you've got like if the text isn't perfectly like rectangular or square, if you've got, kind of
It
blobby?
kind of depends on the context. If it's blobby or goes off like too close to the edge of the page or the gutter, then I might not put a container around it. But if I feel like I have to, then I might do something like curvy and then just leave an open end.
Hmm.
Sometimes I will draw a box around the quote, even if a word goes outside of it, just because it still helps contain it.
Yeah. By the way, this is on page 71 if you're following. Um, okay, page 73. I love arrows, right? I actually was at one point I was thinking, okay, I want to like come up with this library of absolutely every arrow I could possibly think of. And then you beat me to it. So so this was really, really cool to see. So how much to what extent do you use arrows? How often would you find them in your sketch notes? How do you feel about arrows?
I use mostly the top right arrow, the little dotted line thing.
This one right here.
Yeah, I use that almost all the time. If I do other arrows, it's usually just kind of like a standard blocky arrow. Um, this I remember actually trying to come up with this graphic, and it was literally me sitting down. Okay, I have to think of as many arrows as I possibly can to help people like build up their library, and it was very difficult. And
Really? Okay.
after about 5 arrows, you're like, are there any more arrows in the world? I think this is it.
Oh, I loved it. And what I personally like about arrows is that, sometimes you take a look at some visual notes and it can be a little tough to follow, right? Unless there's really good structure. And you've got a section that this is the part that I'm waiting for because I really want to talk to you about like structure and layout because yours is like phenomenal, right? It's really, really easy to follow. But sometimes you look at it and it's just I think Brandy Agerbeck uses the term popcorn. It's just like there's stuff all over the place. And it's like, okay, I might start here and I might go in that direction, but I'm not really sure where to go from there. So
Mhm.
putting directionality into the work, I think, is really important. And I think arrows are a great way to do that.
Yeah,
Yeah,
especially at conferences where this happened actually a couple weeks ago.
mhm.
There's still people out there who have never seen graphic recording or sketch notes, and they just walk up to it and they're like, "This is amazing. What do I do? Where do I
Yeah,
look?" And it's
yeah,
like you have to tell them, "Here's the title, start there, and then follow this little dashed line, or just follow the arrows, or read top to bottom, left to right, like you normally would." And then they kind of find the flow themselves. But it's so much at once for a lot of
yeah.
people that have never seen it before that they don't know where to start looking.
Yeah, you need to make it easy to navigate, and it's in one of the earlier sections in your book. You talk about, for example, use of I think you use the word headlines and then like headers and then subheaders. Is that right? Kind of the way
Mhm.
you think about the hierarchy of information.
Right.
Yeah,
And I kind of stole that from journalism. Like I was in yearbook and newspaper in high school, and it's like, yep, that definitely makes sense. Like we read the biggest, boldest stuff first, we read the next biggest and boldest, and so on and so forth.
Hmm, cool. Thanks. All right, moving on. So this was pretty neat. So I'm on page 85. Building up your visual vocabulary, your visual library, right? Um, you list, I'm assuming that these are like your go-to icons, the stuff that you use all the time, right? Um, I'm kind of curious. So what else would you add to it now? So it's been 3 years since you've written the book. What else
Hmm.
would you say are those things that's like, okay, you just got to have this, right? This is an icon that I use all the time.
Yeah. I don't know if I can think of any off the top of my head. I guess I should look in my little sketchbook, shouldn't
No, that's cool.
I?
I thought this was a great foundation. If you can draw these, whatever, 20 or so things, you've got a really good visual vocabulary. I mean, there's not much that you can't do with this.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much it. Everything that I'm thinking of is already on there. Maybe
Okay.
flags,
Flags, good one. Okay.
and you can put words in the flags. I feel like I'm doing that more than I used to. Um, I think maybe another one is like things to having to do with discernment, whether that's like the judging scales or like
Hmm.
the gavel. Um, I remember I was trying to do a sketch note recently that had to do with like a courtroom, and I was like, oh, I actually don't know how to draw that. So I wrote it in my
yeah.
hard to draw words list to come back to later.
So Dana's asking in chat, how do you draw construction?
I usually do the little signs that they're like in the road. I just have to draw it because I can't communicate. Quick and dirty version.
Oh, nice.
That's how I would draw construction, is the little road sign things.
The little roadside thing. Let me put that on there. That's really cool.
There's other things you could do for construction. It could be a hard hat or a crane, just stacks of wood, a hammer, just anything relating to construction and building comes up a lot in discussions when you're talking about big, broad things.
Oh, Dana's saying in chat, or hazard or caution. That's really cool. Traffic cones, that kind of thing. So how would you, what might you recommend to people who are wanting to, build up their visual library? What's a good way to do that?
I think honestly, it's just start writing stuff down. I advocate for having a hard copy visual library. This one's mine. And whenever you encounter a word that you might not encounter every day, just stick it in here, because I feel like the things that are obvious you recall from memory, and that's your visual library in your head. But I think it's also helpful to have a visual library hard copy. So what I do is whenever I encounter a word that I don't know how to draw like immediately, I will write it down in the front of my notebook or in my Notion app. And then I will come back to it later and do a visual jam with my NOVA Scribes friends and help me figure out how to draw it.
Oh, I just heard a tech tool. So what is a Notion app? I don't know that one.
It's kind of like a second brain. If you've ever heard of Evernote, it's pretty much Evernote only on steroids.
Cool.
Notion, you can do so much with it.
I'll have to check it out. Thank you very much. All right, moving on. And by the way, that was again page 85. Yeah, okay, so this is what I wanted to talk about. So page 92. You remember how you said you'd stolen some things from your book? I'm guessing that's kind of what you were talking about, right? Like the layout here. Okay, so again, one of the things that I really love about your visual notes is that they're just so well laid out. So can you tell me a little bit about your philosophy around layout?
Yeah, I think I'm actually writing in detail about this now, but it's not done yet. If you fast forward to page 99.
99, okay.
This thing called time blocking.
Okay.
That's where I start. So you can block off a space for your header, but if this is mostly for live sketchnoting. So if you're at a lecture or a meeting and the meeting's ending at 10 or this talk is only 45 minutes, then time blocking is kind of how you solve that. So you basically just do a layout line and then you block out the time along it in pencil or just mentally, and then you do the rest of your sketch note based on what time it is and when you're supposed to be ending. I kind of start there and then work backwards with the layout. So how big do I need to make my portrait? And again, so many speakers do a fire hose of information at the end, and so you have to give yourself more space at the end than you normally would. And then the beauty of that is if they actually finish on time, you have all this white space where you can draw something really cool or put their most best quote at the end and kind of do like a highlight, or you could draw a portrait if you didn't earlier. So it kind of opens you up to more possibilities.
Yeah. So time is space then, and you try to allot it to make sure that you don't get to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what happens if you're doing, say, like a live meeting, not so much a lecture where they've got like really clear cutoffs, and because this happened to me the other day, where it was going to be a 2-hour meeting and it ended up going 3 hours. So what happens? Huh?
Gross.
Gross. Yeah.
Yeah.
I was kind of like, you're not paying me for this, Anyway, what do you do in terms of time and space when something like that happens?
For nebulous things like that, I just don't worry about it. I just like, oh, guess I'm going to another page. Guess I'm going to another page. And for meetings, unless you're being paid to take those notes, it doesn't matter. If it's personal, you can just keep going for as long as you need to. If you are being paid to be there, it was actually a DC gig, the last one I did, where I ran out of space because they just decided to go an hour over. I just stop because it's like, I'm out of boards. we're at the last session of the day and you're an hour over time. This is on you, not me.
Yeah. Did anybody give you a hard time about that?
No.
Good.
They're just usually impressed that you're there to show up and draw.
Yeah.
You can also go to the back, like if you're doing foam core boards, you can always just flip it over and go on the back. But
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah. Cool. Well, thank you for sharing about how you do blocking, which is really great. I do want to get back to this. So the layout that you've got here, is this I mean, is this what you always go to? Or here, and actually I should scoot it up a little bit. I'm back on page 92. Is this kind of your standard? Do you vary from this one? How often do you do this particular one?
pretty much that's it. Like, I think most people want to know, who is this person and what are they talking about? Like, if you only have two things, a title and the person is it.
Mhm.
Portraits add a little bit of extra flavor, which I think is nice, but if you're not really confident drawing portraits, you can leave that off. If you're doing it for an event, you can draw the event logo and kind of tie all the notes together. It just kind of depends on the context of what you're doing and who it's for.
Mhm. Has
And
anybody
kind of
ever come back and like said something like, I don't look like that? Is that ever
yes.
happened? Okay, so how do you manage that one?
The first time it happened, it was when I was brand new to sketchnoting and graphic recording, and I drew this lady, and honestly it wasn't a great portrait because I was not great at portraits. I still don't feel super confident at it, but it's like, yeah, I just say I'm doing my best. It was my best guess. It's not supposed to be accurate. It's just kind of like a character of you. And then if they're really upset, I have these giant not plastic, paper stickers
Labels?
that are, yeah, labels that are like half a sheet, and so I can literally
Oh
just
yeah.
cover it up and pretend like it never happened. That's never happened. Usually people just suck it up and go mope somewhere else.
Yeah.
The thing that gets me in trouble is drawing older people who truly are old, but they haven't quite realized it yet. It's like,
Yep.
no, you have a lot of wrinkles. This is truly what you look like.
Mhm.
And they're like, that looks like my father. That's a comment I got
Well.
one time. And I'm like, well, sir, you're 75.
Yeah, I like it. And it's like, why'd you draw me without hair? It's like, because you're bald, you know?
Right. And I think the only advice there is do fewer wrinkles than are actually there. And like last week, I was in Miami. I drew people with fewer wrinkles than they actually had, and they said, I haven't got that good in years. Thank you. And I'd much rather get that comment than that looks like my father. So err
Yeah,
on the side of blowing up the ego.
exactly. All right. Okay. So this was okay. I loved this part. It was such a small thing, but again, getting back to just one amazing technique after another. Commonly misspelled words. I think I've misspelled all of these words at some point. And I actually, as I was looking at it, I was like, okay, I really have to like memorize these things. So how did you come up with this list? Was that app you were talking about before? Because like I wouldn't even think to write something like that down. Do you
Yeah.
keep this with you? How do you use this as a resource?
It starts as in the front of my sketchbooks, I write down hard to draw words and words that I have trouble spelling. Receive is always on there. I'm always thrown off by the I before E thing
Mhm.
every time. Millennial, the L's just get weird for me. And
Yep.
so the start of this list was from my own experience. I went to the front of all my notebooks and kind of made an aggregate. And then I Googled for the rest, like, hey, what do other people misspell? I also remember polling on Twitter and Instagram, what words do you misspell? Just kind of getting people's input there.
Nice. These are great though. Hallelujah. I would be completely lost at spelling hallelujah. Bureaucracy. Good one, Dana. Actually, yeah. So quick chat poll. What words do you misspell? Rachel says all of these. What's one that I have a hard time with accommodate because it's got like a double C and a double M in it. And I'm like, okay, that's like a lot of letters. Recipient from Nancy. That's a good one. Accelerator. Precedent. And it's like, okay, you got to go. Sometimes like, people will come up and like, I had this one thing. Oh, this was really hard. I did this one thing for recently, it was for Jewish day camps, right? And they kept slipping into Hebrew, and I don't speak Hebrew, right? So I was like, um, there was this one word. I don't know if this is going to be okay for YouTube, but there's this one word that I learned in Hebrew. It's called bereshot. Okay. I don't know if there's anybody who speaks Hebrew on the call, but when I read it, well, we were talking about camps. and I quickly read Barashot. And in the context of camping, I thought it was like, the remains of a certain large, land mammal, right? So I wrote it that way. They're like, no, you got that one wrong. Sometimes you got to go to your clients and be like, look, this doesn't come with spell check. Give me a break here. I just love this as a resource, though, Emily. Thank you so much for putting this out in the world. Anything with Isabel, I always want to add an E there. Oh, that one's yours.
Yep.
Yeah. Precedent. All right, cool. So just a couple of other things, and then I want to open it up. All right. So I'm on page 109. I'm just going to say this one page made the whole book for me. I mean, this one was like worth the price of admission right here, because I'd seen this before, like on Instagram, the idea of like filling the negative space with color like that, but it had never really been, I don't know, put into a method the way that you did it. I'm like, oh, that is so cool, because again, we were talking about flow and how hard it can be when you're looking at something like this to say, okay, like where do I go with this? So how did you develop this? Is this something that you picked up? How do you use it, like that the filling the negative space? Just talk to me about that, because this one was revolutionary for me.
Yeah. I used to work for a company that did graphic recording, and they had the same issue. It's like, how do we create flow out of this? And the way that they solved it was to create cloud shapes in between the layers that were really close together. So just like drawing the outline of a cloud in between it. And I kind of took that and ran with it even further and turned it into actually surround the entire section with cloud shapes, and then draw the cloud background as a gray so that it pops out.
Yeah.
And then from there, I was like, oh, it doesn't have to be clouds. It could be anything. It could be lines. It could be just a flat color. It could be geometric. It could be really anything that I want it to be.
Yeah, I just thought, again, this was so cool, because going from this, which is great, right, to this, which is just outstanding, right? Just because it's got that flow, it's got that sense of directionality. It's like how to follow this thing, how to read it, and you're taking notes that way anyway. But when you're looking at it without the context of form and shape, it can be really difficult to navigate. So that's, I mean, again, this one for me, it was like, oh yeah, okay, that's why I got this book, is to learn that thing right there. So thank you again for putting that out there. I just had one more thing that I wanted to talk to you about. So it's funny because Mike, just because you're on the call, you had talked about not doing the sketchnote handbook in color. And Emily, this whole book, this was in color. And yet what was really interesting about it is that you don't make crazy use of color in your book, right? And it's like you save the color discussion for the very, very end, right?
Yeah.
And it's really just like a light touch on this. You talk about analogous, and I think you kind of get into split complementary here, but really kind of high level. And then you've got the philosophy. Let me see if I can change the light a little bit. That this is too much coloring. The yellow, the green, and the purple, which looks sort of like the Mardi Gras effect. And it looks like you're kind of more of an advocate for the monochromatic. Is that right?
I think not necessarily.
Okay.
Because I've seen really colorful sketch notes with like 10 colors done really, really well, but I don't know how to articulate why it works with someone doing 10 colors and why it doesn't work with somebody else doing 10 colors, other than they're just an artist and they know how to use it a lot better. With the example there, it was more like you colored everything in like a coloring book instead of highlighting it. And I think that's what I want to teach people is, when it comes to coloring, you have to be more mindful. You can't just be like, oh, I drew a picture and now it's time to color it in. You have to think, well, why are you coloring it in? Does the tree need to pop out? Is the tree actually important, or is it just there and it can kind of fade into the background?
Right. So being intentional about it.
Yeah.
Maybe somebody who's got, more of an art background than I do can help unravel that particular one, about why some color works and doesn't. I got to be honest with you. I looked at this, I was like, man, I wish I could do that. That was pretty great. Looks like we've got something in chat. Oh, and thank you for sharing your course again on coloring. That's great. Well, we're coming to the end, and I loved how you ended this with your journey, your walkthrough here of your whole process. To me, this is like one of those like family circus cartoons where like Billy's running around in the
Yes.
backyard, right, and doing stuff. So I do you mind just giving us a play-by-play, of your walkthrough? Could you take us through this?
What page is it on?
Oh, I'm sorry. This is 127. I got to remember to do that.
127. Do. Yeah, that was a walkthrough of a normal day when you're doing a graphic recording or a sketch note. And it's actually pretty different now because a lot of the work that I do is digital and I don't have to do like 90% of this. So I guess I'll walk you through an event I have coming up next week. It's first you schedule the event and you kind of understand what the client's goals are and you figure out, why do they want this visualized? Is it that I'm in entertainment, I'm on the screen and people get to watch me because the content's boring? Or am I like a value add afterwards? Hey, we're going to send these notes out to the attendees so that they can be fully present and not worry about taking notes. Like, there's different approaches as to why you're there. And I think it's important to understand that before you ever even start the work. And then you have either emails or calls with the client beforehand just to go over the agenda and what their expectations are. Some clients I want every single bit of content in the sketchnote, and some are just like, yeah, whatever you do, like as long as it looks visual and cool, we're happy. So kind of getting their expectations set up, and then working with if you're working with somebody else to do an event or just yourself, you kind of collaborate with them and get ideas on what you want the template to look like of the header. What are we going to include? The speaker portrait? Are we just going to do the title? Should we put the logo on there? Where should we put the logo? How big does it need to be? And then you get that approved with the client. And then personally, you just make sure that you have your time zones correct. You make sure that you have your templates all ready to go, that your brushes are set up, that your iPad is charged, plugged in. And then you just do the thing. You do your sketch notes. And then afterwards you email those off to the client. And then you do like a wrap up and just say, how did we do? Did we meet your expectations? Did we meet your goals? How can we make it better next time? Would you hire us again? Can we get a testimonial? Thanks.
Love it. Thank you for that. It's amazing. Yeah. And like, in the era of doing some of this stuff digitally, yeah, getting dressed might be optional. You may or may not have to do that. All right. Well, thank you very much. We're going to open it up for questions. And you can, again, you can put them in chat. You can come off mute. So Dana asks, do you have a specific way that you like to have your iPad to draw or capture? Actually, we were talking about apps right before we started. And Emily, you use Fresco, is that right?
Yep. So I was saying earlier that I use Fresco exclusively now because it has vectors, which means you can scale it up or down without losing quality. I've just run into too many clients who are happy with what they get and then they want to blow it up and print it beyond what it was designed for with pixels and vectors. It's like, yeah, here's the vector, go blow it up and print it at 20 feet, whatever you want to do, go for it. And Fresco is an Adobe program. So if you are already an Adobe subscriber, it's probably included in your subscription, or you can do a one-off subscription to Fresco for that.
Nice. And Dana's got her hand up. Did you have a follow-up on that one, Dana?
Yeah, that
I
wasn't
guess.
Yeah, that wasn't actually. I wasn't meaning the apps. I was meaning
like the actual.
Yeah, like this step. Like I use a footrest from IKEA, which is kind of foamy because I don't like it flat on the desk, and it kind of gives me some flexibility to have it at an angle.
Yeah, I recently switched cases. I found this one. It's called Zugu, Z-U-G-U. Let's see if this will actually show up. So it's kind of like this beefy magnet case, and it has different levels that you can set the iPad at, whether it's very erect or kind of flatter. And because it's magnetized both on the top and the bottom, sorry, it's kind of losing with my background here, I can let it go and it will stay, which is nice. So I really like this. I've only had it about a week and a half, but I'm really happy with it. The reason that I got this case was because I have lost my Apple Pencil twice, and I'm a very responsible Apple Pencil owner, and it just ticks me off that I've wasted so much money losing my Apple Pencil. And so this case has a very secure clip in for the pencil on top. I feel like I actually have to grab it out. And then it has a secondary pocket on the back where it can slide in here. So not losing my pencil was the motivation for getting the new case.
Ordering one of those right now. Dana, thanks for dropping the link into chat. Appreciate it. If you're an affiliate, you may have just missed your opportunity. It's a little promotion. What else you got for Emily Mills before we go off the air?
Can I share something
Please.
that is like behind the scenes from the book?
Yeah.
Okay, so that was like a complaint to my publisher. They had this like neon picture of my book for the longest time. And I was like, no, you need to like make it look like the actual book. you can't even read the art of it, just says visual note taking. But anyway, this was supposed to be the original cover of the book. It was like green and not amazing in my
That reminds me of
opinion.
like Diary of a Wimpy Kid.
Yeah, it reminded me of a middle school grade reading. And I was like, this is awful. Who is this for? I hate it. And the publisher was like, well, we know better because we sell books all the time. And I was like, yeah, well, you might sell books, but I hate it and I don't want my name on that. So I had proposed something a little bit more creative and minimal where it focused on the title of the book, and maybe there was me peeling back the page of some illustrations. I just wanted it to look more like a traditional book than like this smattering of stuff.
Mhm.
And then they brought me this concept and I was like, still no, don't
Mhm.
like it. I pointed out that their design was inherently bad because I'm a graphic designer. And I was like, look, you've got this giant chunk of space that you're not doing anything with. Your fonts don't work. You just took the Art of Visual Note-Taking scratched out quick version and you made it huge, which doesn't look good. Okay, here's my revised edition of that. And I still hated it, but they were like, this is going to be the final cover. And I was like, fine, whatever. Then they showed me this, which is what the cover actually is today. I still hated it. And my agent told me that I offended the publisher and that I had to apologize and just suck it up because they know better. And that was just one of those things where you can't win them all. And the reason I didn't like the cover was because it just felt like they took some illustrations from the book and put them on the cover without any context. And I really did not like that, especially because all of these little icon images are supposed to represent a visual library. And you don't really understand what that is until you read the book. And it just kind of looks like doodles, which I go on a little rant about, but it's like, there's no such thing as doodling and sketchnoting. Like every mark you make should be intentional.
Right.
So I had proposed some other alternatives where you can explain the illustrations, or maybe just dial it up. Instead of having some white space, maybe we just fill every square inch with more illustrations if we're going to go that route. Obviously that didn't happen, but that's kind of the behind the scenes of what the book cover
I love the
almost looked
story.
like.
And I also love like the case for self-publishing that you just made.
Yes.
Dana's nodding a lot with a thumbs up. Okay. Cool.
Yes, if I do a book again, I think I would self-publish for sure, just because I have the design background and I think I would want a lot more creative control over what the book looks like and then what it ends up looking like on the inside as well too.
Well, actually, that brings me to the last question I was going to ask you, which is, I mean, you've got the book, you've got the classes. What are you going to do next? What's coming up for Emily Mills?
What's coming up for me is, so I used to do monthly online live workshops. I now do not have internet capable of sustaining a live workshop. I live in a kind of remote area in Oregon, and they literally don't sell internet or hotspots strong enough for me to do that. So I'm kind of pivoting and focusing on courses more than workshops. And in the meantime, that's just what I'll be working on. Spoiler alert, I'm also rebranding Sketchnote Academy. The name will change, the colors will change, and that's coming out. I don't know when, but soonish.
Well, can't wait to see that. All right, everybody, let's give Emily a big NOVA Scribes thank you. Woo! Thanks for coming, Emily.
Thanks for having me.